request everyone, if you can, please move forward in our normal Southern Street fashion and make room for guests who might come into the meeting.
Sri Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna, everyone. In Vedic culture, the juniors speak first. That's because if they say something wrong, then the seniors can gently correct them and they don't feel too embarrassed. I'm very much the junior of these two godbrothers sitting next to me. I haven't been here in the mornings or the evenings, but I have been glued to my computer, thanks to modern technology and the grace of whoever it was that put cameras all over the temple. And Antadrit Prabhu and Vince, who's still there. So many people have been able to tune in and see what's been happening. And I guess the first thing I wanted to say is that there's two types of Prabhupada disciples. There's Prabhupada disciples who joined Prabhupada's movement because they joined Prabhupada. And there's Prabhupada disciples who joined those disciples who were following Prabhupada. So I am very much the latter. And I was a baby when I came, and already these devotees who have been speaking every day were, in my eyes, they were heroes. They were the Prabhupada disciples, and I still think of them in that way. Sometimes people come to me and say, "You're a Prabhupada disciple, aren't you?" And I go, "Yeah, I suppose so." But actually, I've always seen these devotees, Shamsundar and Gurudas and Mukunda, and Malati, Jamuna, Janaki, I've seen them as the Prabhupada disciples. And it was kind of them that I joined. And because they were following Krishna consciousness, I thought that, because they were the original inspiration. And when you're young, and there's no direct access to Prabhupada, which it was in 1974 when I came, you have to look to those devotees who are following Prabhupada to be your inspiration. When I was very young, about 14, my English teacher was there's various book prizes in England. One's the Booker Prize, one's the Whitbread Prize. So he was a Whitbread Prize winner, and his close friend was an author called Alan Sillitoe. And Alan Sillitoe and my English teacher were, they were good friends. And Alan Sillitoe wrote a book called The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner. And sometimes I think of a life in Krishna consciousness as being like a long distance runner. Ultimately, the finishing line, it's going to be you and it's going to be God. But along the way, the long distance runner, which I was when I was 14, and I read the book because my teacher said, well, my friend wrote this book and it's a good book. So he takes inspiration along his way because he's the only runner. And he runs before dawn. And he runs just as the earth is waking up. So he draws inspiration from the dewdrops, he draws inspiration from the trees, and this inspires him as he carries his journey onwards. Sometimes we don't have the inspiration of looking at the finishing line and putting in that sprint, but along the way we get inspiration from different people. So as I've been listening over the past few days, I just realized that it's these devotees who have been speaking that have been inspiring me for the past, what is it now, 35 years, because I originally looked to them as my inspiration, and that was something that stayed with me all these years. So you may not see yourself like that, but that doesn't matter. In Gurudas, you may not see yourself like that, but I got a certain amount of sustenance. some years ago, I was going through my files, and we found the publicity announcements that Shamsundar Prabhu had put out for the opening of Bhaktivedanta Manor in 1973. And all kinds of things were going to be happening. The Archbishop of Canterbury was going to be jumping over the fence to get into Bhaktivedanta Manor. And everybody was going to be there. I think it was Desmond Tutu and all the stars of stage and screen. They were all going to be there. I think eventually a couple of rock bands made it and some stars made it. But the publicity material was. So when I looked at this, I thought this sort of captured the mood of the day that these 6 original devotees gave to us, that it was an adventure. And sometimes I think we have to be careful that Krishna consciousness doesn't become a religion. There's a big difference. That line of inspiration, that we can do this, we can do this, that it remains an adventure. And let's be creative thinkers. Let's not fossilize. If you do want to fossilize Prabhupada's movement at any stage of history, fossilize the bit where they were going to parties, gate-crashing parties, weddings, and aiming for the most important, most influential people of the day. Thank you. So that was very, that's always been very inspirational for me, so thank you very much. And I also thank Rancho Prabhu. Rancho Prabhu was the only Grihasta I ever saw, and I thought that he was rather unusual, because everybody else was in orange. And I looked at him and I thought, gosh, there's another way of practicing Krishna consciousness. And that also helped me. There was a big telephone billboard commercial just recently, and it said different famous people were listing all the people that had made them what they are today. And the idea was to get you to think that you are what your friends help you to become. So choose your friends carefully, and of course phone them and pay the telephone company. But in one sense, we, all of us, are made up of the inspiration that the devotees preceding us have given to us, and that's very important. So I just wanted to begin with some words of gratitude, because without them there would be no 40th anniversary. So thank you very much for coming and doing what you did. Prabhupada, of course, you've heard this story many times, but one fact that I heard recently was that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati kept a map of London in his room, in his office at the Chaitanya Mart. It was pinned to the wall. And he said, I want to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Harinam Sankirtan outside Buckingham Palace and in all the famous places in London. So, although we know the story of, he sent his preachers to London, etc., sometimes we may have to remind ourselves that it was actually his burning desire to have something in London, and that it was with a great sense of purpose and a great quest to satisfy his Guru Maharaj that Prabhupada sent his early disciples to London, and eventually was able to, in 1969 of course, was able to fully satisfy the earnest request of his spiritual master by providing this wonderful temple in London. I was thinking the other day of what the mathematical possibility must be of the greatest musical group in the world with the greatest devotee of Krishna in the world. Add to the factor of a set of the most beautiful Radha Krishna deities in the world, all coming together at the same point in history. If you're I'm not a mathematician, but try and work out the mathematical probabilities in that. It's quite amazing. And so we can see Krishna's arrangement in that, and we can also see Krishna's arrangement in the devotees that he chose to send to do the work for Prabhupada. And sometimes we think of devotees as being somehow or another in the right place at the right time by accident. But actually they were instruments in Krishna's divine hands as Krishna was making these arrangements. That doesn't mean that they didn't make the arrangements, but Krishna guided every step of the way. So thank you again. Sometimes the question is raised, why did Prabhupada name the deities Radha-Londonishvara? And sometimes people may say that that's a step aside from the traditional Gaudiya way of naming deities, but actually it dates back beyond the Gaudiya Mat. It goes back at least more than 1,000 years, more than 2,000 years to the days of the Alwars of South India, the Vaishnava saints, who would praise the deity and name the deity not simply because of the attributes of Krishna, but because of the attributes of the place in which he had chosen to make his appearance. So we have the Lord of the Venkata Hills, Venkateshwar, or we have Tirumala Balaji, or we have the name of the place where they've chosen to manifest. Because let's not forget, Krishna, according to his will, he manifests in a particular place. He chooses to come to that place. And therefore, that place becomes sacred by the touch of his feet. It's like Kurukshetra, or Vrindavan, or Dwarka, or Jagannath Puri, like that. So, yes, it's important that Krishna is in the highest heaven, say the Vaishnava saints, but it's even more important that he comes here for us. Because that's how he's manifesting his compassion. In his highest heaven, he's Adi Purusha, he's the supreme enjoyer. And when he manifests his compassion on earth by appearing as the deity, then he's manifesting his most important form for the devotees. And so, Radha-Londonishvara, even the name suggests that the important fact for us here in London is that Krishna and his beloved Radha has come to London. And this is an important fact. Not only that he's London Ishwara, he's the controller of London. And that's an important thing to always remember. When Shamsundar Prabhu made the beautiful beams, which I always lament the passing of the beams in the very place, it was a unique design. When I saw the temple for the first time, I thought, well, this is how it is. This is a traditional Indian temple. This is how they all are in India. And he put brass strips. He put brass strips on the beams. So, as a young boy, 17 at the time, someone told me that you must never, ever look at Radha-Londonishvara while they're being bathed or while they're being changed. You know, so I kind of grew up a bit on Greek mythology, like the Medusa. You know, you must never ever look at the Medusa, otherwise you turn to stone. And I kind of figured that it was a similar thing. Even if you look at the reflection of Radha-Londonishvara in the brass strip, then something really bad is going to happen to you. Unfortunately, as you were processing in a circle around the temple, sometimes your eye would be drawn because you would want to see Radha-Londonishvara behind the curtain. So there was this great pull within me. Like everybody, I would, like many devotees, I would come to very place only rarely. And I remember making the best use of my time. Quite early on I discovered that if you want to get on in Krishna consciousness, your elbows are quite helpful. And sometimes you have to push your way to the front to be with Prabhupada. So not that I elbowed anybody out the way, but I made sure that I was first sometimes. So Prabhupada sat on a very sturdy Vyasasana, which was right up close to Radha-Londonishvara, so that he could see all the details. And in those days there were many beautiful details on the altar, and these were pointed out to me when I came to see Radha-Londonishvara for the very first time. I think that one of the interesting things which had me discussing philosophically was Lord Krishna's watch. Lord Krishna always wore a watch. So of course the obvious question is, why does Krishna, who's the Lord of Time, why does he wear a watch? Well, I think Rancho Prabhu, that was Lila Shakti's, was that her arrangement? At least that's what I'd understood anyway. She was the head pujari at the time. And of course the other important detail which was pointed out to me was the fact that there was a Lakshmi conch on the altar. And this Lakshmi conch was very rare, and it was always decorated with ostrich feathers. So this combination of ostrich feathers and a white conch shell kind of stuck in my mind. And also the idea of having a seat, having a chair the other side of the altar for, I heard explained on various occasions, Lord Brahma, Narada Muni, Lord Shiva, whoever it originally was. I think it changed over different times. But perhaps the most striking feature of Radha-Londonishvara for me then and now is how close we can actually get to Radha-Londonishvara. You see, at Bhaktivedanta Manor, I think that Shamsundar wanted to make that a very grand affair. So you had to look up at Radha Gokulananda, looking up like this. But with Radha-Londonishvara you came quite close. So Prabhupada's Vyasasana was brought quite close, and it was a very intimate setting. I didn't go on any morning walks to Russell Square with Srila Prabhupada, but about 20 years later I met a young man who did. And this young man had been one of the people that was sleeping in the park, in Russell Square Park. And Prabhupada had asked one of his disciples to go over and wake this boy up and bring him back to the temple, give him a shower, give him breakfast. And 20 years later I met that boy because he had had a shower and had a sleep and had a wonderful breakfast, and then he'd been taken up to Prabhupada's room on the second floor in Berry Place, and Prabhupada had personally spoke to him for an hour. And my jaw dropped when he started telling me this story, because, you know, that's quite a rarity to get 1 hour with Srila Prabhupada. And he said, you know, that man was so kind to me. He was the nicest man I ever met. Now this person didn't take to Krishna consciousness directly, but he remained, if you like, Krishna conscious by dint of his favourable thoughts about Srila Prabhupada for 20 years. And so far as I know, Prabhupada is still the kindest man that he ever met. And if the kindest man that he ever met loved Krishna, then there must be something in this Krishna consciousness. I want to tell you something else, that the first time I ever met the devotees was, of course, through the sound vibration through the George Harrison Hare Krishna mantra, the Radha Krishna temple. And of course, again, thanks to Shamsundar Prabhu's ingenuity, inside every record was a little piece of paper that said, warning, something like that. Warning, repeated chanting of this mantra can lead to states of ecstasy.
That was George's idea.
That was George's idea. And so, of course, what did everybody do? They thought it was some sort of strange, semi-drug-induced trance that you could replicate. So, when I was about 13, 14, in my school, someone slammed the door in my face because I heard them chanting, and they said, "This is private, keep out." And then afterwards I asked them, "What were you doing?" They said, "Well, we were chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare." I said, "We tried it for 10 minutes. I said, "Well, what happened?" They said, "Well, it kind of worked, but we're going to do it again tomorrow to see if we can make it really work." I saw the Radha Krishna temple on the television. Many years later, I met the producer. There's two producers of the Top of the Pops. The Top of the Pops television program where all the popular chart pop songs. And there's an executive producer, and then there's a studio producer who controls all the cameras. Camera 1, camera 2, like this, and does all the floor arrangements and the theatrical setup. So her name is Gail Stadwerker. She's watching this right now, and she's chanting 16 rounds a day. So whatever you did back there, it worked after some time. That's a good story. She'll be coming on Saturday. I don't want to speak for too long now, but I just want to say that I guess one of the highlights of being in front of Radha-Londonishvara was when Prabhupada's 17 volumes of the Chaitanya Charitamrita had been published. We knew that Prabhupada and all the devotees in the Western world were working on these beautiful stories and philosophies of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which we didn't know at the time. So all 17 volumes came on one day, and they were brought on the Sharadiya Rathayatra, when Krishna dances with the gopis under the full moon, and this festival was being celebrated in a very place. And all the volumes were brought in one by one on red velvet cushions, and they were set before Radha-Londonishvara as a wonderful gift of his devotees to Londonishvara. And I think that was the closest thing we got to the spiritual world at that point, that here is this wonderful service that had been done by combined effort in such a short time being offered to the Lord. Quite a historical moment. So today I would like to pray to Sri Sri Radha-Londonishvara that, my dear Lord, this is the most beautiful temple because you are the most beautiful manifestation. Your devotees are the most wonderful, and the spirit of hospitality has been preserved in this small temple. It's a great blessing to anyone who comes here. It's unique. Please keep it that way. And I pray that the great-grandchildren of the devotees who are sitting here today celebrating this 40th anniversary will be blessed just as we have been blessed, and will come back here decade after decade and glorify Sri Sri Radha-Londonishvara and the devotees, and constantly remember the wonderful names of those devotees who originally brought Krishna consciousness here to these shores. Hare Krishna.
Well, I understand the theme of today's talk, wonderful exposition by Kripa Moya Maharaj, is the Rathayatra festival. Am I correct? Yeah. So for elaborating on Rathayatra, we have to go back into prehistory a bit, to the very early days in San Francisco. You must remember, again, like we were talking the other day, that Prabhupada's disciples had no conception whatsoever of what God looked like. Prabhupada had told us, and we felt very, very deeply, and we were convinced that Krishna was a person, a supreme person, who had a form, but none of us were clear what was that form, what is that form. We saw various pictures, not many, there were no deities. We had some of those Brijbasi posters. There were a couple of posters. One showed Krishna, this bluish man, all dressed in jewels, holding a plate with different balls and sweets on it. We had a picture of him as a little cow herd boy, a young, beautiful youth with this crown, and rather feminine looking, sitting by a cow. We had the little blue statue that Gurudas found at the India import shop of Kartashami Krishna with his flute. holding his flute, kind of a languorous posture. We had some pictures of Lord Chaitanya, a tall, golden-colored man with long black hair, with his arms in the air. And so, but our main question always to Prabhupada was, what does Krishna look like? What does Krishna look like? And so little by little he began describing him from his features, his beautiful mouth, his gorgeous glance, things like this. Imagine the surprise when Prabhupada told us one day, holding up this little chunky doll with two great big eyes, no limbs, and he said, this too is God. Okay, talking about the mathematical coincidences you were talking about. When in history could thousands of young people be shown Lord Jagannath and somebody saying, this is God, and everyone goes, oh, okay, that's God. So, the actual story goes, and everyone's heard it before, that Malati was the first one attracted to Lord Jagannath. She was perusing through the India imports. What's the name of that? Cost Plus Imports in San Francisco, down in the Embarcadero, where they had various exotic items. In those days, you must remember again, there was nothing from India in the United States, nothing practically. Except in the huge port cities like San Francisco, there might be one or two import shops. So, as we were interested in things from India, we constantly went there to see if we could buy something that we could decorate the temple with, or just to find out more about India. No one had ever been to India. So she saw these little dolls. There were 3 bins, she told me later. But the one she grabbed was blackish, with red coloring, green coloring, and she slipped it in her purse. She was very good at those things in those days. We had no money. No one had a job. And whatever money we did have, of course, went for rent and the temple rent. We had just acquired this building and there was no money to decorate it or anything. Prabhupada was there. So every nickel and dime we could scrape together went for prasadam for Prabhupada and just paying his apartment rent, things like that. So, out of an old habit, she swiped this little doll. And going back to what Gurudas was saying yesterday about how we each used every excuse to go and see Prabhupada. Over the smallest thing, we would make up some excuse to go see Prabhupada. There's just any moment spent in his presence was the most happy we'd ever been in our lives. So she thought this might be a good excuse to go see Prabhupada. She had something from India to show him. It could have been anything, but it was this little doll. So and she came in his room and showed it to him. I said, Prabhupada, what is this? And she told me after that he immediately bowed down on his knees. And she came to find out that this was a form of Lord Krishna. And he elaborated, told the whole story, and he asked her if anyone in the temple or anyone in the congregation could carve this into something larger. So she mentioned that myself, her husband, was a woodworker, that I could do it. So he called me up. Prabhupada called me up. And he told us the whole story and asked me if I could make it he showed me how high he wanted it. It was about 3 feet. I said, yes, I can do that. And that's the beginning of that period. And suddenly we had a form. Yes, he said, are there others? And she went back and got the other 2 the next day. But suddenly Krishna had a form for us. Prabhupada seemed kind of relieved. Krishna had appeared in this form in this wild place called San Francisco, where there were hundreds of thousands of young people who could accept this form as God, who would I mean, where else would you find that many people who would see this form and say that this was God? I mean, anywhere else in the world they would say it was idol worship. And it took us some time to understand. Okay, if Prabhupada says this is God, sure, I'll accept that. But when he explained why this form appeared, then we felt such a link with the past finally. He said the original of this form is in this place in India, and he told us about Jagannath Puri and the temple there. And we began to read about the history, and it went back so many thousands and thousands of years. We began to feel more and more part of the Vaishnava tradition by meeting Lord Jagannath. So little by little, Prabhupada gave us a grounding, a way to relate to Krishna in a form. So, he asked me to carve this, so I went down to the docks in South San Francisco and found a dismantling yard where they were storing huge pieces of wood that they were dismantling out of homes and buildings in San Francisco. And they had a pile of great big timbers. So I purchased a piece of the wood. It's Douglas fir, probably from Oregon or Washington State. Old growth Douglas fir is from very large trees. Just like I understand in Puri to this day, whenever they carve Jagannath, they select these very large old trees that have no knots in the wood. They're very straight grained, tight grained woods. So I was able to find some pieces of that old growth timber and began the carving. And as I started carving Lord Jagannath, I realized that the longer that I took to carve this deity, the more Prabhupada would stay with us, the longer he would stay with us. There was always a competition with the other temples. There weren't many, but there were 3 or 4 centers vying for his attention, so we wanted him to stay with us. He was our father and our guide and our friend, and the most blessed thing that had ever happened to us. So keeping him in San Francisco in our midst was our top priority. We did everything to keep him there. And everything to go see him individually. Like I would go, just use any excuse to say, Prabhupada, is this the right color paint for Jagannath's mouth? And he would look, a little more red should be there. Like that. And almost, I don't know where they are anymore, it probably got thrown away, but he would draw little sketches all the time. How this arm should look. It's wonderful. But I used the original small doll and calibrated the sizes proportionally to carve him exactly in the same proportions as the doll. And little by little, worked on him a little bit. And then Prabhupada became a little anxious. He began asking me every day, how is the progression of the deity? Oh, it's coming, Prabhupada, but I had some cracks. The other day there was a crack and I had to mend it with some wood, and it's drying now. It'll be a few more days. So, but I think I told this story the other day, then that Prabhupada finally appeared at my door, bang, 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 and came into my room, very grave, and said, you must finish this quickly. I must leave. And he told us then that I should carve the other 2 as well. And that in the coming summer, in June or July, we should put them on a cart and take them on a ride. He told us the whole story to the beach. So, the first Rathayatra, there was a group of people next door to us on Frederick Street, another storefront next door, called the Diggers. The Diggers stood for everything should be free. So they had a free store next door for the hippies. They gave out old shoes and clothes and food and whatever anyone would donate to the Diggers, they would distribute it out of the room, the building next to the storefront next to us. And so they had a truck, an old truck, lorry you call them, where they went around, used this lorry to pick up supplies to distribute to people. So we had no means to even rent a truck. We had no money at all. So we asked the Diggers, and they agreed to loan us their truck for that day. And we got, Mukunda and Gurdas got some permissions from the police, but they wouldn't let us go down Haight Street. Haight Street was just, in those days, shoulder to shoulder packed with hippies for about 6 or 8 blocks, long blocks, maybe 10 blocks, with Golden Gate Park at the end of that street. And hundreds of thousands of people congregated there daily. So they figured it would cause too much traffic problems. So they put us over 1 block parallel to Haight Street. What is that street called? Page? No. Page Street. Yeah. So we could start, and we could take this truck with the deities in the back up Page Street, and then through the park.
No, Irving, adjacent to the park.
We could park it at Irving Street.
Irving Street, we went down Irving.
Irving Street, to the beach.
Yes.
All the way to the beach. That's about maybe 3 or 4 miles to the beach. And this street didn't go level. Haight Street was level, but this street had several hills like this, dips and hills. The only thing we had time to do and money to do was build a kind of a rough, constructed back on this truck with some canopy of flowers and cloth. It was all thrown together very quickly. We borrowed a sound system from someone, and at that time, were all 3 deities there in the first Rathayatra? I'm not sure. Okay, there were probably Subhadra was always the last one, so she was probably, the paint was probably still fresh. And this Rathayatra is, too bad Gurdas isn't up here too, but this Rathayatra was classic because nobody knew what to do. We didn't know anything about it. Prabhupada was not there. So the truck started out, and I'd never driven this truck before. I was driving. It had a very complicated gear shift. And hundreds of people showed up. I don't even know how they found out about it, but thousands maybe came. And everyone was chanting out loud, and we didn't know what to do except just take off. So off we went, and the deities were on the back, and they weren't tied down very well, so they were going back and forth like this. And we went over a hill, down a hill, and started up the next hill, and I realized I was going too fast to try to make it up the hill, so I slowed down a bit, and then I knew I had to gear down. So I put the clutch in, and I couldn't get it into the next gear. So the truck started rolling down backwards down the hill like this with the deities in it. Everybody running, jumping from side to side. Just at the last moment, it got into gear and off and went back up. So in this way, the first Rathayatra in the world, in the Western world, had a very parallel beginning in London. We had just arrived in late '68, and we thought to have a Rathayatra in '69, the summer of '69. Someone asked a question the other day whether when Lord Jagannath was installed in London, and I think it was at the same time that Radha-Londonishvara was installed in December of '68. But I remember I had carved the Jagannath deities prior to that in different flats where we lived. In Betterton Street I worked on them and stuff like that, so they were ready. In Betterton Street we had Lord Jagannath, I remember that. He was there. But after we got kicked out of Betterton Street, we all began to live in different flats and bed-sitters in different wide scattered parts of London. Toward the spring of '69, when it came time to start preparing for our upcoming Rathayatra, I was living in Balham with Malati. Gurdas was in Clapham, or something like that, maybe South Clapham or something. And Mukunda was somewhere else far away. So the entire chore of building a Rath cart was given to me to build in my yard, or in the yard below my flat there in Balham. Just big enough to squeeze. I had this giant cart in mind. Oh, it was almost as big as this room. And nothing's too grand for Prabhupada. So with whatever money we had, I began buying wood and set out this machine. And I thought that I would use lorry axles instead of wood, because the previous carts had trouble with the hubs and the transmission wheels. So I remember I went to a wrecking yard and bought lorry axles and started building this cart. And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And we would run out of money. And Gurudas would run around London collecting and selling something, and he would come over with 5 pounds so I could get wood to work the next day. Or then Mukunda would show up with 2 pounds so I could buy some more nails. Like this, it got piece by piece. It took about 2 months to build this giant cart. And we're only 6 people in London. And we don't even have a temple anywhere. We're determined to put on this magnificent festival in the center of London. And meanwhile, Mukunda and Gurudas are working on permissions. Somehow or other, the police agreed to let us do this. And the route was going to be from Marble Arch to Trafalgar Square down through Piccadilly, the standard route. So that was set. The date was set. I forget the exact date, but time was coming toward that. The spring was getting later and later in the spring, and we were working day. I began trying to. I recruited a couple people to help me from time to time. And this thing got huge. I mean, it filled the whole yard at this flat in Balham. We weren't even sure we were going to get it out of there. The gate was barely. I made it just wide enough to get through the gate. There was about this much room on each side. Finally, it was done. The next morning was the Rathayatra. Only Balham is something like 15 miles from here, at least. Very far away. We weren't really sure until the last minute how to get it to Marble Arch. So we thought, well, if we leave very early in the morning, maybe midnight, we can push it over there. And I had this old truck, a little red truck with some rope. And I knew I could maybe assist the pulling on flat stretches, but this truck wasn't very powerful. I thought that if we came to any hills, I couldn't get it up the hill. So Gurudas came over, Mukunda came over. So the 3 of us somehow got this cart out of the wheels were almost as high as this room. Huge wooden wheels, bolted together, hundreds of bolts. So heavy. And we got it out the gate and started pushing it toward London. We had to go over Albert Bridge and over the Thames, and then all the way from Chelsea down to Marble Arch. And so I was pulling with the truck on level places. The thing was just barely moving. It was so heavy, and we couldn't steer it very well. To steer it, we had to pick up the back end and gradually move it. So we picked out we had an A to Z, and we picked out the straightest road. And some of the streets were brick and cobblestone. So every time we hit one of those streets, the whole thing would go like this. I was sure it was going to shake apart any minute. And there was kind of a ground fog. It was summer, it was a sunny day, it was coming, but there was a ground fog that hadn't burned off yet. So from time to time I would look back, and I couldn't even see the cart or Mukunda and Gurudas behind it, pushing it. I think Kula Shekhar came too to help push it. There were three people pushing it. I remember we came to this little hill, a little rise, and the truck, I knew the truck couldn't make it, and I thought I'd better drive over to the other side and stop any traffic that might be there. So I disconnected from the truck and I drove over the hill, keeping cars out of the way, and I parked. I didn't know. I waited and waited and waited for the cart to come up over the little rise, and it didn't come. It didn't come. So I got out of my truck and I was looking. You could see the horizon of the street in the fog, and suddenly I saw these steam fumes going up from Mukunda and Gurudas' breath. The cart appeared in the fog and we started down. Everyone was so exhausted. We finally got that thing to Marble Arch. Just before that was ready it was starting at noon or something. We got there about 10 minutes till noon. right at Marble Arch. And all the policemen were there stopping traffic and everything. Hundreds of people showed up because we widely advertised it. And everyone's, okay, now it's time, let's go. Deities came, they were on the cart. Thousands of people chanting Hare Krishna, and off we went. This glorious big cart. And it went about 50 feet. And the right rear wheel broke and fell to the pavement, and the whole cart toppled like this. It just leaned like this, stuck in dead in the water. That was it. What do we do now? So, meanwhile, traffic was piling up from Marble Arch, and the police were going crazy. The next day on the television, it talked about the largest traffic jam in London history. The entire city was it was gridlock. And that was the first Rathayatra.
We carried them to Marble Arch.
Yeah, they just carried the deities and carried on. But, and they came back the next morning and dismantled it. Anyway, that's the first Rathayatra. From then, I wasn't really involved with Rathayatra in London after that. During the second Rathayatra, I was living out at George Harrison's place. And Nari Narayan and some other brothers built the cart and carried on the tradition. But it's from what I've heard, maybe you guys can elucidate later Rathayatras. There's always some problem like that. Has been quite frequently some problem or two involved with getting their lordships through the town. When was your first Rathayatra?
That was, once we went up to open up the Manchester Temple, and we were there for a few months. Then I was called down to London to help build the Rathayatra car. And then I think that was Nari Narayan. And I remember we were collecting all this, because at that time they were still recovering from the war, and there were many old broken houses, bombed out houses. So somehow or other we were collecting wood from all these broken houses, free wood. We didn't have to pay anything. And we were constructing that. And we were thinking that Prabhupada was going to come. I can't remember whether he did or not. Did he come for this?
70 what?
Which year would that be? After in Manchester?
Nari Narayan was 71.
Yeah. And that was that same year that we...
Before we went to Manchester.
Really?
Prabhupada came in 72, right?
71.
Yeah.
He came in 71 too?
Yeah. Not to Rathayatra.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, not to Rathayatra.
72, 73 he came.
Rathayatra. Both years?
If I'm correct with the film chronology. Well, 72, 73.
But he said, but we thought he was going to come. He said he would come.
I remember one time we were working on this in this building, on this old car park in King's Cross. I don't know whether it exists anymore. But we were building this Rathayatra, myself and Sukarma and Swayambhu. And when it was the Sunday feast, there was big anxiety because we were out there at the car park and we were thinking whether we were going to get any of the Sunday feast, because it was quite a walk, and somebody would have to be really conscious, that the Rathayatra devotees who were building the cart had to be saved some prasadam, and somebody had to bring it out. So I remember, it was like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. We were in this little shed, and it wasn't very comfortable. We were feeling very hungry, and then this devotee staggered up with the prasadam, and took one look at it. And we said, "That's not enough." Our eyes were bigger now. You know, we thought, that's not enough for us, we're working so hard. So the poor boy, you know, I don't know who it was, he went all the way back, you know. He set off to go and get more prasadam. So then we started to eat this prasadam. We realized we were full up. We felt really bad, you know. He got all the way back to bring more prasadam. Yeah, that was the time that Narayan was, he was a very dominant personality, and he was very frightening, and he was like, I never met anyone like that, Narayan. I mean, you know, he's a violent person. I wasn't violent at all, you know. I would always back off if there was a fight. But Sukama, my godbrother, you know, he was an aggressive person also. So we used to get into these fights about how to build a Rathayatra cart and how to do it. But the wonderful, we've already talked about it, how it came to a point. But didn't Narayan come for 2 years? First year and second year? The first year that cart we built with the old junk wood, it broke.
From the previous Rath car you used? Oh,
No, it was a new one, but it was from all this old rotten wood from the war. And somehow or other it broke. So I'm not sure. Then the next one, we had some more money and we decided we'd make a better Rathayatra car. And that was the year that Prabhupada was coming? When was that?
Well, just...
You should know, you're
I'll
right.
just explain that at the end of the festival, we, you know,
Which festival?
Rathayatra.
Which year?
Well, 71, I think 72 as well. We had permission to bring the Rathayatra car to Trafalgar Square, but we had no means to take it away. So we dismantled the whole thing. Carried off in the back of trucks and bits of wood. That's why we had to build a new one the next day. And all the wood got used for different things during the course of the year.
And we didn't build them with the purpose of being torn apart. You know, we just used hundreds of nails and bolts just to make sure it held up. There was no easy way to dismantle it. It just had to be wrecked every year.
But the wheels were the only thing that were completely indestructible. Remember the wheels?
Yeah.
They were very heavy. I mean, it took like 5 people to lift a single wheel. So we had to take those away in the back of the truck.
Were you there on the test route?
Yeah, I was there on the test route with Narayan. And yeah, the police were against us. They wouldn't give us permission. So Narayan begged them to give us a test. It was in that car park in King's Cross. And nobody knew how the car, it was actually impossible for the car to go around the route. They made like a big, they chalked out like a right-angled turn that the car was supposed to turn. And going to the, you know, the engineering, it's just not possible for the car. But Narayan was just praying like anything. And we were all pushing and the police were there. And somehow or other the car just turned around. And Narayan was just amazed. Oh, God is great, it's a miracle. It was a miracle. Complete miracle. So then, the Rathayatra I remember most of all was the one that I became involved in. I was just a new bhakta really. I got first initiation. And I got this letter from my uncle that he'd left me some money. This was 11,000 pounds. It was coming. It was quite a lot of money in those days. And Shamasunda heard about it. So, because the whole temple, you know, the temple was really broke. I remember one time we were going on Sankirtan, and with Sri Bhuvanath, we're just about to go out on Oxford Street, go out at the very place on Oxford Street. All of a sudden, this big guy, huge guy, in a boiler suit, with a spanner came in. Said, "I've come to turn off the gas." And we didn't know. I was thinking this is really nice. You know, it's just like the old hippie days. So it's just what I wanted. I didn't want an institution. So Sri Bhuvanath ran upstairs. He said, "Wait a minute," you know, and he put a few notes down, and the guy went off, you know. So that was the mood right from the start. So as soon as everyone heard that I had some money coming, and I was writing special letters to the solicitor, "Can I have some money in advance?" before you know, what you call it, the
Escrow.
the
Probate.
Probate, before the probate happens, could I have some money in advance?
I was hoping you composed those letters.
So there I was, you know, just a new devotee, and I got all this money in my pocket, you know. And that's quite a popular man. I had to. So as soon as he put me, he said, "I want to put you in charge of the Rathayatra." So I didn't have any idea really, except that I worked on the Rathayatra. So I thought, well, we have to just have a new Rathayatra card, we'll have to have lots of prasadam, good advertising. And there was one devotee, what's his name? Mikey? Do you know, he had blondish hair. He's a very intelligent boy. Mahadev. I tend to get controlled by, you know, people who are very, you know, intelligent, and they can have good ideas. I think, okay, let's go along with that. So he thought, well, we have to make this huge tent for Trafalgar Square. And he said, my friend, he can help me build this tent. And I think there was some relative. There was a whole scam going on there. And it had this wonderful, like, futuristic yellow plastic material covering the part of Trafalgar Square, going right up onto the stage. And it was going to cost about £3,000. It's a huge amount. And I was just splashing out. One day, Prabhu Vishnu rang me up from Ireland. He heard that I was, you know, I'd got all this money. He said, "Hey, Ma Vishnu, we need a Sankirtan van for Ireland. It only costs 1,100. So I said, yeah, okay. So he came running over and bought the Sankirtan van. So this way the money was getting spent. Malati came to me. She said, we need new mukuts for Lord Jagannath. And they're only £50. So it was so nice, you know, I was just spending all this money. And we had a plan, we put up these posters on all the buses in London. He designed a poster, Sri Bhuvanath didn't like it, said it was impersonal. It was like these big eyes, and Jagannath is coming or something. And we had the posters on all the buses. And we bought new wood for the Rathayatra car, and Purandara, was it Purandara? Was another Rathayatra? Purandara, the one that's now the anti-Puranjan. That was the next year? Yeah. So anyway, we really pulled out all the stoppers. I was spending all the money, and we told the police, we said, well, we just want to have some little tents, you know, on Trafalgar Square. Actually, it's going to be this huge big thing. And Dave Thomas to have a little tent, you know, and we had all these potted palm trees and banana trees, put them around the bottom of Nelson's column. And of course this was the year that Prabhupada was coming.
Yeah.
And it was the most wonderful thing. You must know, you're GBC, right?
Yeah,
So
I was traveling with Prabhupada. I came with him after you guys put it
So
together.
what happened then when he came to Maharaj?
Well, he'd been traveling for almost 24 hours from Bombay. So he was very tired, I thought. And, so I said to him, well, I'll travel along. I rented a car, so I'll travel along the cart, and if you get tired at all, you can hop in and we'll go out to the manor and you can sleep, rest. But Prabhupada started out on the cart from Marble Arch, but a few blocks later he jumped down and stayed on foot, dancing and walking and dancing in ecstasy all the way to Trafalgar Square. I couldn't believe it. I was driving there, so I'm thinking, Prabhupada's just getting so tired. Come on, get in the car, let's go. No. He carried on all day. And then when he got to Trafalgar Square, he sat down and lectured for an hour and led kirtan for an hour. And then he went back to the manor and greeted guests and devotees late into the same next night. I mean, like almost 2 days without rest, Prabhupada. And he looked as fresh as a daisy the whole time.
I was supposed to be, in charge of the parade. And the police came up to me. And because Prabhupada was dancing, all the senior devotees like Vijayananda, Hansaduta, a huge kirtan. And there was I was just a new devotee. But they told him, everyone told him that I was in charge. So they came up to me and they said, the old man is holding up the whole of London traffic. Because Prabhupada was stopping and looking at Lord Jagannath, and the whole parade was stopping. So the police said to me, can't you get him to move? Can't you get him to move? So I was helpless. Couldn't do anything. So fortunately it's on a film. The person who made the canopy, he also made a video. And that's the video we have of that. We paid for that film. And he gave us that nice film of Prabhupada. Rathayatra. The other bus. You got that? That's the film.
These stories are there also.
Huh? The big canopy is there in that film.
Yeah, the canopy's there and the same stories are there.
It's in?
Well, you're speaking in the Remembrances audio, and Shamsundar is also speaking.
Where's that book? So, are you gonna, can I say something?
Yeah.
But so, one thing is that I was really scared to go into Prabhupada's room. I wasn't a really pushy guy, plus I thought, whenever I thought Prabhupada would find some, fault with me. And so I read in the conversations that Shamsundar, after Rathayatra, Prabhupada was really pleased because of the news cutting in the Guardian newspaper. And there's a beautiful picture on the front of the Guardian. And the picture was of the Rathayatra cart in the foreground. It was taken in such a way that Nelson's column is below the Rathayatra cart, the top of the Rathayatra cart. And the headlines was, rivals. Jagannath Rathayatra, was it ISKCON Rathayatra? Rivals Nelson's column. And the newspaper, Prabhupada was tickled pink, He was so happy. And in so many places, in Los Angeles and other places, he was talking about how we defeated Lord Nelson.
Then you came to see Prabhupada, you were starting.
No. So then, actually, Prabhupada, he put it in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I wanted to read that, because that's my only claim to fame. He said, Rathayatra was put in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the purport, because in Chaitanya Charitamrita it's describing the Rathayatra festival, and how the Rathayatra cart was so high as Mount Meru. of Sumeru. And the people of Jagannath Puri saw the Rathayatra as higher than Mount Meru. So, and Prabhupada wrote in the purport, 1973, there was a wonderful Rathayatra, and the Guardian newspaper said that the Rathayatra rivaled Nelson's column. That was written in the Chaitanya Charitamrita.
But just think of the training that the opportunity for training this gave you. As a very shy devotee, you suddenly became the boss. And you had to organize everything.
Just had the money, that was all.
You were paying for it. Now, this man, I don't know how many of you know this man wanders alone through the most horrible jungle in the world, the most horrible place left in the world, in the center of Africa. I've seen him at work in the Congo. He wanders through the Congo now, by himself. Month after month, where they kill you for your shoes.
So what happened?
He's unreal. Think of the training that they gave him to do this.
What had happened is said in the conversations. That they were reading through the conversation. I have to get this off my chest in public, because it's a kind of regrettable thing for me. But anyway, Shamasundar told Prabhupada in the conversation, said, there was a boy, Mahavishnu, he paid for the Rathayatra card yesterday. And Prabhupada said, he spent his aunt's money well. But I always regret that the GBC could have called me in and said, this is the boy. But they didn't. So I'll always remember. I think in future,
No, it's up to you. You have to push yourself in the door.
I was so busy doing something else. I wasn't even aware of it. I wasn't waiting outside.
He's waited 36 years to get that off.
Actually, it was the second time I'm using it.
Vishnu wanders with his danda through the most remarkable place in the world. I went there. I worked in Zambia, a country adjacent to the Congo, for some months. And compared to Congo, Zambia is a very peaceful and settled place, almost like the Switzerland of Africa. Things go on normally there. But as soon as you cross the border into Congo, it's like the difference between day and night. It's the most violent, colorful, but unsettled place left on the planet that I know of. And Mahavishnu wanders month after month through this place with a couple of devotees.
We're trying to have Rathayatra there soon.
That's why he wears the crazy hats and stuff. They leave him alone. They think he's a holy man. Wandering through the jungle.
So then after that, the police became angry because they realized they'd been cheated by Mahadev. And one of the stones in Trafalgar Square, when they were putting up this big tent, this big canopy, it looked really beautiful. It's like the spiritual world. And it cracked one of the stones. And they said, you said it was only going to be a small tent, it was a huge one. So the next year, they said we couldn't have Trafalgar Square. So, and you said, oh, you're just a neophyte devotee had made a mistake, and it's quite true. And but then it was a problem. We had to go to Battersea Park, right? After that.
What about now?
No, we're in Trafalgar Square. We're back in Trafalgar.
Back in the square.
And Prabhupada said in Los Angeles, I read the conversations, a range of huge civil disobedience. The police. This is you accuse the British of running a police state because they're stopping us on religious prejudice, on religious grounds. They're stopping this movement. The police are. What right do the police have to stop a religious movement? And we should make massive protests. I don't think we ever did about that. I don't think we ever did. The protests came when we tried to get the manor opened later on, like the big protests.
Also the 1973 Rathayatra also sparked a protest within the Christian community. Yeah, there was we didn't find that out till years later, but there was a huge letter writing campaign. They wrote to the Queen, they wrote to the House of Lords, they wrote to MPs all over the country. And this forms a chapter in a book called The Trumpet Sounds for England. It was about how the Christian country of England was slowly fading away because last year graven images were fed food, and the food, after being blessed by the idols, was distributed in the heart of London, only a few hundred yards from the mother of all parliaments and Buckingham Palace. We must stop this now, otherwise this nation will no longer be a Christian nation. Anyway, that protest obviously didn't work. If anyone's interested, I still have one of those magazines.
Oh, you've got one?
Yeah, I've got one of those from 1973.
Souvenir magazine.
Souvenir magazine. How many did you print?
I can't remember. A few thousand.
Okay. Anyway, there's one left. And that Roncho.
I have one too.
You have one too.
I'm entitled. Me and Mahadev made that magazine.
That was you and Mahadev. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. Oh yeah. Wasn't there some connection with It magazine and something? We borrowed styles from...
Yeah, sure. We were influenced.
Yeah. That was wonderful.
Excuse me, I'd like to say that that Rathayatra we're discussing can be seen in the film, our DVD series. So that's available. We have copies of that here in London now. It's a wonderful film, and thank you, Maharaj, for paying for that. But also those stories are there also, plus more.
Is that the full? It was a feature-length film, which actually set the scene, went down to Trafalgar Square, interviewed devotees, gave the whole background, and then followed the Rathayatra. No, that's the one that you're speaking.
Big Brother said he spent his aunt's money well. So I have no regrets. But I didn't have hardly a toothbrush after that. I think I ran up some debts, actually.
You went to the convo.
No, I didn't. Because, you know, everyone thought I had so much money that they gave me credit. So actually, when I ran out, then nobody could pay the credit. The loans that I took.
That's the system we all follow.
That's it, following in their footsteps.
I think we bounced checks all over England in those days. But we flew Prabhupada from the airport to the manor in a helicopter.
Oh, yeah.
We had 9,000 pounds worth of chandeliers in the temple room. All these items were never paid for and subsequently repossessed. But while Prabhupada was there, he enjoyed them. That's what counts. I remember the night before Prabhupada was due to arrive at the manor once, that I was building the throne, his Vyasasana. We ran out of wood and we had no money to buy more wood. Plus it was late, so we dismantled all the furniture upstairs put into the Vyasasana. So when Prabhupada came, the Vyasasana was ready. We were tearing molding out of the old molding, colorful molding out of the walls, knocking it into the Vyasasana.
Oak.
Oak, yeah, the old oak molding that came.
I remember
into
this time, because I've been a sculptor and artist a little bit, so Shyamastani told me to make this Vyasasana with all these bits of the old fireplaces and everything. And it was there, and then for some reason he told me he painted with his gold paint. And I thought, my goodness, we've got all the best oak in England, and now we have to stick this gold paint on it. And I was thinking, well anyway, I'll just follow his instruction because he's the GBC. And I was and there I was, in fact, another moment, I was painting this Vyasasana sheepishly, and then I heard Prabhupada coming down the stairs with Shruti Kirti, and the stairs were creaking. I said, oh no, Prabhupada's going to blast me for painting with this gold paint. So I thought the only thing I can do, because he's getting closer and closer, so that he was coming to see the Vyasasana. So as he got closer, I thought my only escape is to pay my obeisances. So I paid my obeisances, and his feet just came right up to my nose like this. I was just cringing, you know, saying, oh no, what's he going to do, what's he going to say? And then his feet moved away. I remember that. I've never been so scared, you know, I thought it was going to be a thunderbolt.
You carried on painting?
Yeah, I was just carrying out painting. I thought it was wrong, you know. And then when Prabhupada saw that Vyasasana, he said, is this for Lord Shiva? Houses, you modeled it on the houses.
Exactly. Gurdas and I went to the House of Lords one time. And one of your friends, Lord Brockway or somebody, invited us. So we sat in the visitors' gallery upstairs and watched in action down there. And one of the things that we noticed in the corner was the Queen's throne. Whenever she came to a meeting of the House of Lords, they had a throne for her. And I thought it looked so majestic there, so that we copied that. That was the model. We had a photo copied the Queen's throne. Fitting for Prabhupada to sit. Liked it all right.
So we're off the topic now.
Rathayatra is a zany affair. We go back to what you were saying about Krishna being the zaniest. So Rathayatra emulates Krishna's zaniness in a way. It's very nice, colorful, a deep part of London's history. In summer when we can all get together and celebrate that wonderful time.
I remember one time I was on travelling Sankirtan with Paul Vishnu Maharaj, and we were thinking, Rathayatra's coming up, so we don't want to go back to the temple too early, because they, we all find that they'll bring us back and they'll make us temple commander, or and then they'll get us married. So we were staunch brahmacharis then. So we're thinking, we better be careful. So we'll only come back. They were sending books out to us in different places in England. And we picked them up at the station. So we'd been out for about 3 months. And we hadn't been back to the temple. But we thought, now we have to go back for Rathayatra. So I don't know which year this was, maybe 73, 72 or something like that. And we pulled in at Trafalgar Square in our old travelling Sankirtan, and there were no books in it. It was just empty because we were sleeping on top of the books. So it was just completely empty now. And we pulled in at Trafalgar Square. Sorry, at Marble Arch. Everyone was just standing there. The Rathayatra car was there. Bajari was there. He was in charge of the parade. And Vishnu said to Bajari, he said, "Who's bringing Jagannath?" He said, yeah, who is bringing? He said, you better. So we tore down Oxford Street like, you know, breaking the speed limit. And we were sweeping out the back of the van. We said, we're going to pick up Jagannath. We pulled around the corner into Berry Place. All the Pacharis were standing there. Who's going to pick up Jagannath? I said, we are. So then they put Jagannath into the back of the travelling Sankirtan bus. And we tore off to the Rathayatra. And we put him on the car. So that way we consider that a great reward for our austerities on travelling Sankirtan. Jagannath came in our car to Rathayatra. Jagannath Swami King. Jai! Questions about Rathayatra?
If you still have any newspaper or any giving some information about the role of vision in Krishna cult, I mean about some visual presentations in the cult, and this is a fantastic example of very attractive and appealing image going around the streets and around the town. It would be very fantastic if I can use it. Just if you have anything like you told me you have a paper or whatever it is, newspaper or video or anything. So I would please ask.
Yadabara you should talk to. He's got films. He's got a DVD with all of the films.
And this newspaper?
Newspapers, articles.
Some souvenir paper?
Who was collecting these things?
I have news cousins.
Between Ranchor and Yadabara, you'll find everything.
You got the Guardian newspaper?
I've got photocopies.
Photocopy. Okay, that's good.
Thank you. She's doing her PhD on Hare Krishna London.
One other thing is, the first Rathayatra in San Francisco, we discovered a film of that. I don't know if you've seen that.
I saw your, it's on your DVDs.
It's on the DVDs. First, that was on YouTube, and I could not figure out who to contact for that original, so I just took it off YouTube. But it's maybe a 2 or 3 minute film of 1967, the first Rathayatra in the Western world.
You have the film at your father's crib when we put on the play?
Yes.
Great.
Also 1970 Rathayatra in London. We had 1970 Rathayatra in London, 1972, and 1973.
Yadabara has done a great service. He's collected all the bits and pieces of video from the earliest days into these marvelous CDs. Visual history of ISKCON, Prabhupada. The most thorough collection there available. And then on the narration of it, he's interviewed all the old devotees all over the world to match the videos. So it's a unique thing. How much are they? You've got a free plug here.
A 30-hour set. It's a 30-hour DVD set of 11 DVDs for 108 pounds.
108 pounds. 30?
30 hours.
30 hours. Wow.
There's 3 audio tracks that you can listen to. So in essence, it's 90 hours of material.
Huge project. A huge gift to the devotees of the world. I was just going to fill in just a little of the detail that I think it was the Rathayatra the following year. The Rathayatra cart, at one point, the police claimed it mounted the pavement. They claimed it got out of control. I can't remember, I don't know if that was 73 or 74. And it was on the basis of that, probably backed up by all those letters that you talked about from Christians, that they didn't allow us to have a Rathayatra car. They never actually prevented us using Trafalgar Square. What we did, I believe it was for 2 years running, we carried Jagannath in palanquins for the whole parade. And the first year, I remember they were very heavy. And so the second year we made them lighter, the palanquins. And then the Rathayatra was reinstated, I think it was in '76. But it was never actually, we were never banned from the square. The police didn't let us use the Rathayatra car. Yeah.
They've engineered them better now.
And they, yeah, oh yeah, well, I think that's when Paranjan got involved, because he sort of designed a Rathayatra car that it obeyed the Ministry of Transport rules as to the dimensions of a road-going vehicle. So then they couldn't prevent us having it. And the shift to Battersea Park, I have to claim responsibility for that. After we moved, years later, when we got Chaitanya College, we moved Jagannath from the manor to, because briefly he was at the manor. When Rathayatra came, he wanted Jagannath at Bhaktivedanta Manor. We moved him from there to Chaitanya College. Then when we lost Chaitanya College, while Jagannath was up there, there was 1 or 2 years where we had no Rathayatra in London, because Jagannath wasn't in London. It was LA on Venice Beach, been very inspired by those. And so for about 5 or 6 years we had Rathayatra in Battersea Park. And it seemed like it was a huge success. Everyone really appreciated it. But the price of renting the park went up and up and up until eventually it was prohibitive.
But now they're putting a price on Trafalgar Square.
Yeah, I think the Rathayatra returned to Trafalgar Square in, what, 92?
But now, I heard that they were going to charge, police were going to charge something for securing, for looking after the parade.
Yeah.
For the procession, then again.
Oh, for the procession.
To take shoes, a question.
To take shoes, the Rathayatra Acharya, he will tell us everything.
Actually it was 1982, I remember Rathayatra being in Trafalgar Square with a new park which had been called Chaitanya College. And then Jagannath came back in 84 to London, assuming there were those dates. And then it was 85 when Ranchel took me down to check out Battersea Park. And then it was 13 years at Battersea. 13. Until 1990. I think it was 1998 or 1990.
98, that was the first
It was 98, I think, was the first one back to Trafalgar Square again. And since then it's been Trafalgar Square.
Are there any initiations? Prabhupada give initiation at the Rathayatras? Did Prabhupada give initiation at the Rathayatras in Trafalgar Square?
They had a fire sacrifice. The police also complained about that, right?
Yeah.
It was a small fire sacrifice, which we didn't have permission for. It was
I don't know why.
second initiation.
The first fire sacrifice was in '72, and Prabhupada initiated about 20 devotees on the plinth on 1972. However, yeah, the police had been told, permission had been sought, but not really, because they'd been told, well, we want to light a few candles. So, what actually, happened it wasn't at all what they'd expected. And, but I believe that we actually had a completely illegal fire sacrifice for a wedding the following year. But after that, it was never allowed again.
That's right, there was a wedding.
There was a wedding, yeah. Govardhan, I think there might have been two couples. Govardhan was one of them.
Are we going to be talking about them? No, we won't be talking about the Prabhupada coming to Bhaktivedanta Manor. This is not really, this is to do with Radha-Londonishvara, right? That's a different occasion.
Jai Sri Sri Radha-Londonishvara ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, 40th Anniversary Mahotsav ki Jai. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating. Shamsundar Prabhu, Vishnu Maharaj, thank you so much for coming and sharing, giving us all such deep insight into the history of Rathayatra and Lord Jagannath. I think, Shamsundar, did you mention about carving of these Lord Jagannaths here?
Are these the ones I carved?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, these are the same Jagannath deities. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I told the story. I carved them one by one, gradually from place to place, in the early days of arrival, after arrival. Different flats and apartments, and Betterton Street. So we always had Jagannath right from the beginning, really.
Also Douglas fir.
Out of Douglas fir from I got the wood here in barge dismantling works down in the Thames. Dismantling these large rafts from Canada. So this wood was from Canada.
Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha-Londonishvara ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki Jai, the Tagore Premanandi.